What happens when a girl with a disfigured face spends her entire life silent and enduring humiliation, even from her own family? You won't believe how one person, just by looking into her eyes, turned everything they had tried to break in her upside down. What happened next left them speechless. Sophia woke up before everyone else. She always woke up early, not because she had to, but because the silence before the family woke up was the only time she could breathe. The kitchen was cold, and the floor creaked under her bare feet. She put on an old, faded sweater, grabbed a bucket, and went to fetch water. Her father had forgotten to turn off the gas on the kettle. Again. She cleaned it up silently, as always. The water was freezing. Her hands were numb, but she washed everything anyway. White shirts for her brother, towels, curtains that her mother had hung up. For the holiday. She didn't ask what holiday. Holidays in their house had long been the same. A tablecloth spread out, flat faces, and a lump in her throat that even soup couldn't wash down. Sophia wrung out the fabric, as if she were wringing the last remnants of anger out of herself, not at her family, at herself. For still hoping. When the door slammed, she didn't even turn around. She knew it was her mother. She walked like a swallow on ice, quietly, but accusingly nonetheless. "You got up before everyone else again," she said reproachfully. "I wasn't sleeping." "I see. I wouldn't sleep with a face like that either." Sophia lowered her head. Her sweater slipped down a little, revealing part of the scar. Her mother grimaced. "Don't forget to cover it up. People will be coming tomorrow." People meant the neighbors, her uncle and aunt, their 3 children, and some exiled nephew from another city. They would all come, chew their food, stare at their plates, and pretend not to notice her face. And then there would be gossip. Then her mother would say that Sophia was to blame, that she shouldn't have stuck her face in the fire, that she was looking for attention, but she wasn't. That night, she pulled her brother out of the burning room. He was 6 years old then, chubby, sleepy, his face full of terror. And then, fire. And that was it. Months in the hospital, bandages, pain, and her father's words. "You've disfigured yourself, Sophia. It was your choice." Now that choice was with her always, on her left cheek, in the form of a winding pink line that ran from her temple to her chin. No foundation could help. No glance could remain indifferent. Her brother entered the kitchen, now an adult, tall, his voice slightly rougher than before. "Is the kettle on?" "I've already boiled the water." "Yeah, thanks." He sat down at the table without looking at her. Not once. He didn't even nod. Sophia placed a mug in front of him. He took a sip and muttered, "Don't sit next to me tomorrow, okay?" Well, in case someone starts asking questions, just so there's no fuss. She stood there with the mug in her hands. The steam rose from it as if she were trembling. "Of course, I'll sit in the kitchen." He nodded, as if that was how it should be. And again, silence, as ordinary as the morning chill. In this house, it was worth more than any words. What would happen next would change her whole life. If you think that the hardest part is already behind you, you are wrong. What comes next is the truth that has been hidden for too long. Stay. Her father returned at noon, as always, without warning, without knocking, just opening the door and slamming it behind him. It was as if he were entering a barracks rather than a house. He was wearing an old jacket and a coat that smelled not of the wind, but of something sour and damp. He didn't say hello. He rarely did. Sophia automatically stood up to take his coat, pour tea, and set the table. All without a word. It was easier that way. It didn't make him angry. He took off his shoes and walked past her, looking through her. "Where's your mother?" he asked. "At Aunt Lena's," she replied. He nodded, as if noting in his mind that he could now smoke right there in the kitchen without her disapproving sighs. Sophia put the teapot on the table and sat down opposite him, but a moment later he looked at her as if there was something superfluous on the table. "Why did you sit down?" "Just, I'm a little tired." "Have you ever tried not showing when you're tired? It's annoying." His words were like cold nails, but she already knew it was better not to say anything in response, because every word would be turned against her. Better to keep quiet and exhale into her cup. He lit a cigarette. The sound of the lighter was sharp and short, then silence again. "Don't forget to greet the guests tomorrow," he said, "so it doesn't turn out like last year." "Like what?" "Don't pretend you don't understand. You look like a dog that's been beaten behind the barn. People are eating, by the way." She clenched her hands under the table. He didn't look at her. He looked out the window. An old rag hung there instead of a curtain, and through it the whole landscape seemed covered in dust. He exhaled smoke and said almost lazily, as if in passing, "You've always been too soft. That's why they walk all over you." Sophia didn't even realize at first that he had said that. He hadn't raised his voice, but every word sounded as if it were being struck against glass. Too soft. She stood up. She didn't answer. She just went into her room. There was her corner. Not really a room, but a space between an old wardrobe and the wall, where her bed and a stool with books stood. No door, no shelves, no sockets. Just a window that wouldn't open. Sophia sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. There was almost nothing left of her father in her. Not his stubbornness, not his loudness. Only pale skin and an ingrained habit of silence. "Too soft," echoed in her head. But is being soft a bad thing? Is it bad to get up early, wash other people's clothes, clean up after everyone, keep quiet when people are shouting? Is it bad not to lose your temper? Not to fight? Not to curse? But in this family, it seems to be bad. In this family, softness is considered weakness. Caring is considered annoying. A scar is considered ugly. An old photograph lay on the shelf, black and white. Sophia is holding her brother's hand. She is about 12 years old, and he is 5. Their smiles are sincere and genuine. And then there was a fire. Everything burned down except their faces, and this guilt that no one asked for, but everyone gave them. Sophia ran her finger across the glass. It was dusty, as if memories were dust too. Downstairs, a door slammed. That meant her father had left. That meant she could be alive again. Until evening. We approached the edge, and what would happen next would turn everything upside down. There would be no rescuers in this story. Only her. And the painful truth. Stay. The dust in this house was special. Not the kind that settles on books or gets stuck in the corner between the windowsill and an old wardrobe. It was everywhere. In words, in glances, in the gaps between sounds. Sophia didn't notice it, just as one doesn't notice air pressure, but she could feel it on her skin. Sticky, stuffy, impossible to wipe away with a rag. Life here went in circles. Morning, water, stove, laundry. Day, cook, clean, disappear. Evening. Don't get in the way. Sophia lived as if in a strange house, even though the walls were familiar, and the wallpaper was the same that she and her mother had put up 15 years ago. Back then, everything seemed like a game. Here's a flower, and here's a butterfly. Now the flowers had faded, and the butterflies looked like moths. Her brother, Thomas, woke up later than everyone else, and ate quickly, as if he had a train to catch. He hardly spoke. He used to be her best friend. After the fire, Sophia spent all day in bandages, and he brought her apples from the garden and quietly read fairy tales under her bed. And then something broke. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was shame. Now he looked through her as if she were not a person, but a piece of furniture. "Do you know what she yelled at me?" he said to his mother one day, thinking Sophia couldn't hear him. "Yeah, just like that. She stood there with her ugly mug and lectured me, like she owned the place." His mother just sighed. "Don't touch her. She has her own karma." Her own karma. As if she were cursed. As if her face were a sentence. Sometimes Sophia wondered, what if she had just run outside that night without grabbing her brother? Would he still be alive? Yes. Would she be beautiful? Yes, she would. But then she would be just like them. And now she was a stranger, even to her own family. Her father had his own ritual. Come home, eat, smoke, keep quiet. He only looked at her on 2 occasions, when he needed to say something nasty, or when her mother started talking aloud about her lost youth in front of her. Then he would nod. He didn't defend her. When Aunt Lena came, it got worse. She always brought a pie, sat down in the middle of the kitchen, and pretended not to notice Sophia. "So, when are you getting married, Thomas?" she would ask. "Come on, Lena. With sisters like that, who would want to?" "Oh, don't say that. She has a pretty face, of course." "Well, anything can happen in life." And then she would add, looking at Sophia, "Still, you should find a doctor. Plastic surgery works wonders." "I don't want to." "If you don't want to, don't complain. People with worse faces get married." Sophia smiled. She smiled because it was easier. Because if she didn't smile, she might cry. And if she cried, she would immediately become touchy and vulnerable and start begging for pity again. In the evening, she went to the barn. It smelled of hay, old boots, paint, and mice. This was her corner, an old bench where she could read, alone, without anyone looking at her, without words, without mirrors. She took a book out of her pocket. The pages were dog-eared, with someone's pencil marks in the margins. She read slowly, in a whisper. Each word was like a lifeline. She felt a longing growing inside her, not because she was unhappy, but because no one believed her. And suddenly, footsteps. Quick, heavy. She hid the book. "What are you doing there?" It was her father. "Just readin'." "Alone? In the barn? Where else would I be?" He looked at her with disgust. "You can't be like everyone else, can you? Everything is wrong with you. You can't stay in the house. You're ugly, and you behave like an ugly person." Sophia stood up. A lump formed in her throat. She didn't know what to say. Not because she couldn't find the words, but because if they came out, it would be worse. He waved his hand and left. She remained standing in the dark, and suddenly she realized that what she feared most was not the words. It was that one day she would start to believe them. The guests were supposed to arrive for dinner, but they came early. Sophia heard her mother rushing around the kitchen, swearing under her breath. "What kind of manners are these? As if you're at home, honestly." The clatter of plates, the smell of burnt meat, the rustling of tablecloths, everything mixed into an anxious cacophony. Sophia got up from the stool where she had been sitting for the last half hour, trying to pull herself together. "Go put on a scarf," her mother said without turning around. "It's hot outside. People don't care. You don't want the children screaming after dinner, do you?" Sophia didn't answer. She just walked past, slowly, as if through sticky air, drew the curtain, and covered her cheek with a piece of cloth. Not for the guests, for herself, so that they wouldn't think she was showing off. The gate slammed in the yard. She heard voices. Aunt Lena, Uncle Marco, their 3 teenagers, and someone else. A man's voice, but not familiar. Not Thomas, not her father. Not a neighbor, young, confident, with a barely audible accent, as if he wasn't from around here. Sophia went out onto the porch. Her mother was already greeting the guests, playing the role of the caring hostess. "This is Daniel," said Lena, placing her hand on the shoulder of the tall, unfamiliar young man. "He's my second cousin's son. He just moved here. He's staying with us for the summer until school starts." The boy nodded and smiled warmly at everyone. Sophia noticed how his eyes lingered on her a little longer than usual. He didn't look at her forehead, her hands, or the floor like everyone else who saw her for the first time. He looked her straight in the face, and he didn't look away. "Hi," he said. "I don't think I know anyone here." "This is my niece," said Lena, lowering her voice as if mentioning Sophia required caution. "She's special. She helps around the house. Well, you'll see." Sophia felt her fingers itch, not out of anger, but out of humiliation. Special, as if she had a tail instead of a scar. "Sophia," she replied, and held out her hand. Daniel shook her hand. His hand was warm, dry, confident. He didn't flinch. He didn't freeze. He just shook her hand like he would anyone else. "Nice to meet you." And he smiled. It wasn't a big deal. It was a push. Imperceptible, but noticeable. As if someone had quietly opened a window in a house where the air had always been stifling. She couldn't sleep all night. The walls creaked from the heat. Mosquitoes buzzed at the window, and a single thought spun in her head. He was looking at her. Not to the side, not through her, not from below. Right at her face, at the face with the scar, where her whole life was. And he wasn't scared. He didn't feel sorry for her. He didn't turn away. He just said, "Nice to meet you." And he shook her hand, not like a glove from a closet, but like a living person. But as soon as she remembered his gaze, another image came to mind. Her mother's lips, pressed together until they were white. Her brother, buried in his phone. Her father, with a crooked smile and a phrase he swallowed. But Sophia had already heard it 100 times in her head. Here we go again. Daniel stayed with Aunt Lena. They said he would help with the repairs. He was studying to be an architect. Smart. Talkative. One of those people who can be polite and interesting at the same time. A day later, he was invited over to get to know the relatives better. And her mother, as if in passing, said, "You wouldn't sit at the table, of course. They'll start again. Where did you come from? What? Why aren't you married?" And you'll just stare at them blankly. Sophia didn't answer. She was too tired. Not from the words, but from their predictability. Everything in this house ran like clockwork. Her mother covered up what couldn't be said directly with venom. Her father remained silent. Thomas left as soon as he could. And everyone pretended that she wasn't a person, but a shadow in the corner. But now there was someone in the house who saw the shadows and wasn't afraid. In the morning, she looked in the mirror, the one with the crack in the middle. Her left eye looked like it belonged to someone else. The scar ran from her temple to her chin, glistening slightly. Her mother had given her some powder last year. "Put some on if you're going out." Sophia obeyed and got an allergic reaction. She didn't put any more on. "You know, if you show yourself, they'll eat you," she whispered to her reflection. But for some reason, she wanted to take the risk. She came down to lunch without her headscarf. Her mother almost dropped her plate. "What are you?" "It's fine. It's hot." Their glances hung in the air for a second, like dusty rags. Thomas grunted. Her father said nothing, just slurped his soup loudly. Daniel looked at her. He just looked and smiled. After the meal, he came over to help with the dishes. Sophia was standing at the sink when she heard footsteps. She turned around. He was already there. "Can I help?" She nodded. Her voice stuck in her throat like a half-chewed apple. "Listen," he said, handing her a plate. "Where did you get those fingers?" "What fingers?" "Smart ones. You know, like musicians have, or someone who knows how to sew." I do laundry, I cook, I read books." He nodded and said nothing more. He didn't ask, "What happened to your face?" He didn't mutter, "I'm sorry." He just stood there washing spoons. When he left, Sophia stared out the window for a long time. He walked down the path easily, as if he knew where he was going, and she caught herself thinking that for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to hide. Sophia got up before everyone else. This time, it wasn't to do the laundry, cook, or sweep. She simply couldn't lie there. There was something unsettling in her body. Not anxiety as usual, but a pulsation. It was as if someone inside her was quietly pushing her forward. And she knew that today she had to go. Daniel had mentioned yesterday that he would be at the stream helping Lena. The bridge had collapsed. Sophia had remembered this by chance, as if in passing. But she had been thinking about it all evening. He would be there, and she could, not should, not had to, but could, go over. She took an old shirt out of the closet, not the one she wore at home, stretched out and stained with fruit compote, but another one, the one she had bought herself, secretly, with money she had saved from her part-time job. It hung limply on the hanger, never once worn. Her mother had said, "Why do you need that?" "To make your ugliness more obvious." Today, Sophia put it on. No scarf, no excuses, no need. Her mother was watering the garden in the yard. Hearing footsteps, she turned and froze. "Where are you going?" "For a walk." "Like that?" Sophia didn't answer. She turned and walked away, not running, slowly, as if each movement were measured, as if each step were a tolling bell. When she turned toward the woods, her heart was pounding as if she had been running. The path was quiet. The branches rang with morning moisture. Further on was a bridge. Old planks, the smell of water, mowed grass, and him, crouching in a shirt with rolled-up sleeves. His hair was stuck to his temples, his face covered in dust. He was working, not noticing her. Sophia took a step, then another. He turned around. "Hi," he said, and straightened up. She nodded. "Are you alone?" "Yes, I just came out." He smiled. "Can you help me?" She came closer and took the board from him, with her hands straight, without hesitation. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. For the first time in her life, or at least in many years, she didn't apologize for her face. They worked in silence. Then he sat down on the edge of the bridge, rolled up his pants, and dipped his feet in the water. "Are you always so serious?" Sophia smiled. "How do you see me?" "Strong. Someone who doesn't lie." She sat down next to him. The grass tickled her ankles. The sun shone in her eyes. "I'm afraid," she said suddenly. "I'm always afraid. Of what people will say. Of what they will think. Of how they will look at me." He nodded. "Well, you came out. There's no going back now." She looked at him, not with hope, not with trepidation, with gratitude, not for accepting her, but for not turning away. When she returned home, her mother was sitting on a bench with Aunt Lena. "Well?" Lena asked. "Where have you been wandering?" Sophia walked past, calmly, and none of them said another word. But that same night, at dinner, her father suddenly glanced at her. That same heavy look, from bottom to top. "You've changed," he said, as if passing sentence, and she nodded. Yes. For the first time in many years, Sophia was no longer afraid to go to the store. Not because the face had disappeared. It was because something had shifted in her mind. She no longer wanted to be invisible. She didn't want to go back to the way things were, to that familiar crack between the closet and indifference. She would go into the shop at the bus stop, nod to the saleswoman, choose some bread, and even look into the eyes of those who tried to pretend they weren't looking at her. Some did look, and quickly looked away. But she no longer lowered her head. She didn't hide. Daniel showed up every day. No calls, no warnings. He just came up to her, in the shed, by the stream, in the yard. It was as if he wasn't afraid to be around her, even when being around her annoyed everyone else. "How are you?" he would ask. "Quiet," she would reply. "What's that like?" "Like being in a closet when the lights are off. You can't see anything, but you know what's there. Dust, paper clips, and an old umbrella. And that's your whole life." He laughed. He always laughed with her, not at her. It was as if he wasn't judging, but agreeing. "Yes, I know. That happened to me, too." Once he brought a book, with bookmarks and notes. It turned out that he also read a lot. Not intellectual or required reading. Just things that heal. Sophia looked at the cover, unable to believe that someone had brought her a book. He hadn't taken it, stolen it, or hidden it. He had given it to her. "There's a chapter," he said, "about a man who thinks he's no longer needed. And then it turns out that he's the only one holding up the bridge." A bridge? Between the heart and the head. Sophia put the book on a stool and sat down next to him. The shed seemed warmer than the house. No one looked at her with pity here. There were words, and between them there was silence in which she could breathe. "Do you know how you look?" he asked suddenly. "No." "Like you want to ask. Can you see me too? Or are you just pretending?" She didn't have time to answer. Somewhere in the distance, her mother shouted. Her voice was irritated, sharp. "Sophia! Where are you wandering off to again?" Sophia cringed. It was as if her adult body had suddenly become a child's again. But Daniel put his hand on her shoulder, calmly, without pressure. "Do you want me to tell her you're with me?" She shook her head. "Number, let her think I'm not here." He nodded, and just sat there. Word by word, evening after evening, she allowed herself to speak for the first time, not to justify herself, not to apologize, just to be. And the more she spoke, the clearer she understood. Her silence all these years had not been weakness, but armor. She had survived, and now she was beginning to live. Sophia didn't notice when she stopped being afraid of her own shadow. It was as if the scar on her face no longer determined how she moved, how she spoke, where she put her feet. Day after day, without realizing it, she began to live differently. At first it was small things. She no longer waited for her mother to finish dinner before sitting down at the table. She stopped asking permission to leave the house. She began to look people in the face on the street. She even went to the store wearing a new skirt, without a headscarf, without her usual grimace hiding her pain. "It suits you," Daniel said when he saw her. Simple and straightforward, as if he were talking about the weather. And then he added, "But not the skirt." The confidence. They started going for walks, sometimes near the old pond with the rusty bridge, sometimes in the thickets behind the school, where no one had been for a long time. He brought berries and told funny stories about his grandmother, who once beat a moose with a shovel because it had stolen a bucket of cabbage. Sophia laughed, really laughed, so much that her cheeks hurt afterwards, She hadn't laughed like that since she was a child. "You're always so quiet," Thomas said once, noticing her reading in the garden. "And now you're smiling like an idiot. Because I'm not with you." "Exactly," he said, and walked away. The family began to get annoyed. Her mother spoke more and more often about insolence and inexplicable changes. "It's as if someone else is living in her body," she whispered to Lena. "She used to be as quiet as a mouse, and now look at her. Her shirts are ironed. She wears lipstick. She's turned into a queen." Her father remained silent. But now there was more tension in his silence than ever before. He watched without interfering, but Sophia could feel that he was ready to explode. "Still," she continued, "she and Daniel would arrange dinners in the barn. She would bring stolen vegetables from home, tomatoes, onions, sometimes even a piece of cheese. He brought bread, jam, cookies that had fallen off the shelf. 'Have you ever tried strawberries on bread with butter?' he asked her once. No. He spread some on a piece of bread and handed it to her. The taste of childhood, even if you didn't have one. Sophia took it. Sweet, warm, crunchy. She took a bite and her eyes stung, not from the taste, from the surprise that it could be delicious. Life could be delicious, even like this, with scars, with pain, with a shadow behind her. "You're a magician," she said quietly. "Number, I'm just not afraid to be around you." He would sometimes touch her hand. Sometimes he would fix her hair. Gently, without being intrusive, as if asking, "May I?" And every time she answered, "Yes," without words. Once, she allowed herself to touch his face for the first time, with her fingers. She just ran her fingers down his cheek, as if checking if he was real. He closed his eyes and didn't move away. She didn't sleep that night. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking, does she really have the right? To warmth, to care, to life, without excuses. But the atmosphere in the house was growing increasingly tense. Her mother walked past her as if she were a piece of furniture, but with a look on her face as if she were dirty. Thomas threw books around, slammed doors, and left for the whole day. Even the neighbors began to whisper, "Is she with that stranger? With a face like that, a man? Come on, you're lying." Sophia heard them, but she didn't tremble. Not yet. Daniel came up to her one day and asked, "Do you want to leave?" She looked at him. "I'm afraid. This is my home. Even if it's hell, it's familiar." He nodded. "I'm not saying now. Just know that if you ever decide, I'll be here." She nodded, and for the first time in many years, she felt that she wasn't alone. It happened on a day when nothing seemed out of the ordinary. In the morning, the smell of fried onions and overheated oil filled the air. Her mother was frying flatbread. Thomas was at home. Someone was calling her father, and he was grumbling loudly in the kitchen. Sophia was washing the floors to get away from the commotion. Not because she was told to. She just knew that when everyone was home, it was better not to be seen. Suddenly, the old phone rang, the one that had been hanging on the wall since the 1980s. Her mother picked up the receiver and almost immediately turned pale. "Who is it?" "When? What doctor?" "Oh my God." Sophia came out of the bathroom, her hands wet, a towel on her shoulder. "What happened?" Her mother stared at the wall as if she hadn't heard. Then she suddenly exhaled. "Lena had a heart attack. She's in the hospital. She's unconscious. Marco is alone. The neighbors took the children to their place." Her father stood up as if he didn't want to, but had to. "Let's go." "Wait," said her mother. "Daniel is with them." "So what? He's a stranger. He won't be able to handle it. They exchanged glances. There was something tense in that look, something more than concern. Sophia felt it in her back. Her chest tightened. "I'll go," she said. "I'll check if they're all right." Her mother flinched. "Don't go. You're already—" She fell silent. But Sophia had already gone out the gate. Lena's house was quiet. Daniel was sitting on the porch, holding his youngest, a 5-year-old, in his arms. His face was pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He smiled, but it was a tired smile. "You're here." "Of course." She went into the house, helped feed the children, gather their bags, and make the beds. She did everything quickly and silently, as if she had done it 1,000 times before. He was nearby. Their fingers touched. They didn't say much. There was no need. Then her mother and father returned. They entered the house, and the air immediately grew colder. Her mother looked at Sophia as if she were dirt under her fingernails, but her father spoke first. "Who do you think you are, giving orders here?" "I wasn't giving orders. I was helping. You don't need to help. It wasn't your job to save him." Sophia froze. Daniel tensed. Thomas, who had appeared behind his father, said, "She just decided that now she has a man. She can rule the roost." Her mother grabbed the child and, without looking at her, said, "You're disgracing us, even here." Sophia couldn't take it anymore. "You're the ones who are disgracing us. Not me." The silence was so thick, you could hear water dripping somewhere. Daniel came closer and stood beside her. Not in front, not behind. Beside her. "That's it," Sophia said quietly. "I'm not going to be silent anymore." It was a turning point. Before that, she had lived trying to fit in. Now, that was over. There was no going back. Even if she stayed in this house, she would never be the same. The house fell silent, but it wasn't silence. It was the calm before the storm. Sophia could feel it in the creaking floorboards, in the heavy air, in the way her mother didn't say her name. And her father. It was as if he had forgotten he had a daughter. He came home, ate, looked out the window. But if Sophia went into the kitchen, he would get up and leave. Sometimes Thomas would drop a phrase into the air. "It's a good thing no one from the village saw, for now." Or, "With news like this, you could start a newspaper. Ugly woman seduces orphan." Daniel continued to visit. He was quieter than before. He helped out. He supported her with his gaze, his touch, his silence. Sophia was drawn to him like a thirsty person to a glass of cold water in the heat. But even that began to become dangerous. Her mother, as always, chose the most despicable tactics. Whispering, glances, complaints to the neighbors. One evening, Sophia went out the gate and saw her aunt from the next house quickly turn away and say to someone, "Yes, with that scar. And now a strange man." She must have lost her mind. Sophia wanted to go over, to say something, to explain, but she froze. Not because she was afraid, because she suddenly realized it was useless. One evening, her mother came into the room, not to her corner, but into the room as if it were someone else's territory. "Listen to me. We raised you. We fed you. We put up with this scar. And now you act like a queen in this house. You walk around with that smile." Sophia remained silent. "Who do you think you are? You're nobody. You're a disgrace. You've always been a disgrace. You just kept quiet before. And now you've got some crazy idea. It's embarrassing. People will talk. Everyone will talk. But you don't talk. You whisper, I'll scream if I have to. I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. And you stab me in the back? No, Mom. I'm just trying to be human for the first time in my life. Her mother screamed, not from pain, but from anger, as if someone had trampled on her pride, as if her daughter, instead of apologizing for being ugly, had refused to be ashamed. Get out, she said. Tomorrow. Don't let me see you again. Sophia nodded. Okay. And she left. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just left, like an old coat that no longer kept her warm. She left in the morning. No drama, no shouting, no fuss. She just put a couple of dresses, the book Daniel had given her, an old notebook, and a pen in a bag. Everything she owned fit into a cloth bag that smelled of soap and the past. Her mother slammed the door behind her. His father didn't come out of his room. Thomas pretended to be asleep. Even the floorboards beneath her didn't creak, as if the house was trying to erase her from its memory. Sophia walked along the fence and felt that she was breathing with her back rather than her chest. Each step felt like she was lifting her feet off the ground. Further on was Lena's shed. That's where Daniel lived. It was temporary housing, with a crooked door and a peeling porch. But that's where she was headed, because there was nowhere else for her to go. He came out to meet her in a t-shirt, barefoot, with sleep in his eyes. Where are you going so early? She silently showed him her bag. I got kicked out. He froze. He didn't rush to hug her. He didn't say, poor thing. He just stood there, looking at her, as if he were seeing her for the first time. Come in. She went inside. She sat down quietly on a stool by the window. It was hot in there, and it smelled of wood and potatoes. The house was old, but full of life. He poured her some water and handed it to her without saying a word. Sophia took a sip. Her hands were shaking. Her chest felt empty. They didn't just kick me out, she said. They disowned me. Now I'm not even a daughter, not a sister, not a person, just nobody. Wait, he said. That's not how it works. It does, she replied. When you're a mistake from the very beginning. He sat down opposite her. He took her hand, silently. I have nowhere to sleep, she said. I have nowhere to go. I have no money, no future. I don't know how to live, Daniel. All I know how to do is wash clothes, clean, and disappear. He squeezed her fingers. That's not you. Then who am I? You? You have a family, a career, self-confidence. All I have is a scar, and even that doesn't belong to me. They made it mine so I would have something to be ashamed of. And I was ashamed. My whole life. Her voice broke. She covered her face with her hands. I just wanted someone to say once, "You're not ugly." Not out of politeness, not out of pity. Just truly. He didn't answer. He just came closer, knelt down, and slowly took her hands away from her face. He looked into her eyes for a long time. Then he pressed his lips to her cheek, where the skin was scarred, broken, pink, alive. He kissed her, not secretly, not cautiously. He kissed her like you kiss the most beautiful part of a person. Sophia froze. Then she closed her eyes. But even then, she knew this wasn't the end. This was rock bottom. Because when he went to the store to get food and left her alone, she heard a knock on the door. She opened it. Her father was standing there, anger in his eyes. Have you slept with him yet? Sophia didn't answer. Live your life now, however you want. Just know that we don't know you anymore. Your mother said you died to the family. He turned and left. She slammed the door shut. She sat down on the floor. She hugged her knees, and for the first time in many years, she cried. Not out of fear, out of emptiness. The night was sticky, like a sheet after a heat wave. Mosquitoes buzzed against the glass. The lights had been off for a long time, but sleep would not come. Sophia lay on the narrow bed, listening to herself, to her breathing, to the pulse in her temples, to the silence inside. It seemed that there was nothing left in her now. No anger, no hope, no words. She remembered the first time she saw her reflection after the hospital. Her mother held the mirror, quickly, harshly, as if to say, "This is the price you pay for your heroism." Then she took it away silently. No comments. And from that day on, no one asked who she was before the scar, only who she had become after. Sophia got up and went to the window. The night was warm, but she couldn't stop shivering. It felt like a string had snapped in her chest. The voice of her grandmother, whom she hardly remembered, floated into her head. The most important thing in life is not to become a stone that is easy to walk around. It is better to be the wind. Let it be fickle, but alive. She ran her hand over her cheek. The scar was still there, and it would always be there. But what if it wasn't a mark? The proof? That she didn't run away. That she stayed when it was scary. That she saved someone. That she lived. She sat down on the floor and hugged herself. And she started talking, out loud, to no one, to herself, to everyone who wasn't listening. I'm tired of being convenient, tired of keeping quiet, tired of waiting for someone to love me so I can say, I'm worthy. I don't want to prove myself anymore. I just want to be. She remembered how Thomas used to say when they were children, "You're like a fox, cautious, quick, but living in the shadows." Back then, it seemed like a compliment. Now it was a sentence. There was a mirror hanging on a nail in the shed, small and cracked. She walked over and looked at it, and she saw her eyes. Tired, intelligent, real. I'm not ugly. I'm a human being, she said aloud. For the first time without a lump in her throat, without expecting to be contradicted. And she realized that she didn't want to go back. Not to her family. Not to pity. Not to the mask of goodness. Yes, she was hurt. Yes, she had no home. But she had something inside her that she hadn't had before. Something quiet and strong, like the trunk of a tree. It didn't scream. It held her up. She sat down on the bed and covered herself as best she could. And before she fell asleep, she whispered to herself, "Tomorrow I'll get up. Not for them, for myself." In the morning, the sun beat into the window brazenly, mercilessly, as if on purpose. Sophia opened her eyes without alarm. She just woke up, without an internal list of who to feed, who to please, what to hide. Daniel's book was lying on the windowsill. The bookmark had fallen out. The page opened to the phrase, "You can't build your life on the ruins of someone else's opinion." She smiled. "You fell late," she whispered, but just in time. The kitchen smelled of coffee. Daniel was standing at the stove in his silly t-shirt, with a pear drawn on it, and the words, "Trust me. I'm organic." He turned, saw her, and simply said, "Good morning, Lisa." She sighed, not out of awkwardness, but because of how easily he had entered her world, without knocking, without shame. "Are you leaving today?" she asked. He nodded, but not far. "I've been offered a job restoring an old building, 2 hours by train, with housing, with work. Sounds like a start." He looked at her intently. "Come with me." Sophia sat down at the table. She picked up her cup, took a sip, closed her eyes. Not from the coffee, but from herself. Because the decision had already been made. It had been living inside her all night. Now, it was just breathing. "No," she said. "I have to finish here first." He nodded. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." "I'm not going to. But I'll tell them. One last time. And then that's it. Everything will be truly mine." He wanted to say something, but didn't. He just walked over and hugged her. Not like a lover. Like a man who knows that sometimes love isn't about taking someone away. It's about giving them space to come back to themselves. Sophia put on her best dress, the one her mother called vulgar. She let her hair down. She didn't hide the scar. And she left. The road home was short, but today it seemed long, like the path from the old self to the new. In the yard, her mother was washing something, bent over a basin. Her father sat by the shed, staring at the ground. Thomas was fiddling with his phone on the porch. Sophia stood in the middle of the yard. She looked at them. Not as enemies, as people who had once chosen to turn away, and had done so again and again. "I came to tell you." They were silent. "You don't need me, and thank God for that. All my life I tried to fit into your fear, your shame, your silence. I thought that if I became good, if I became less, if I disappeared, you would accept me. But you were just waiting for me to disappear forever." Her mother raised her head but said nothing. "I'm leaving. Not from you, to myself. And I won't come back. Not for a word. Not for a crumb. Not for an apology. I don't need your approval. I am enough for myself now." Her father turned away. Thomas snorted. Her mother wanted to say something, but Sophia had already turned and walked away. No drama. No goodbyes. No hope that they would call her back. Because now she was free. It was a difficult day. The sky hung low, as if pressing down on her shoulders. The air was thick and sticky, smelling of dust and old grievances. Sophia walked down the road without looking back. Behind her was the house that had been her prison with soft pillows. Ahead of her, there was nothing, but for the first time, that nothing did not frighten her. It breathed. It gave her space. When she reached the barn, Daniel was already waiting for her on the porch. 2 bags stood at his feet. He held a thermos in his hands and tickets in his pocket. He looked at her, not questioningly, just with that special look that people who see things have. "Everything?" he asked. "Everything," she said. "I told you everything." And she left. He nodded, helped her put her things in her backpack, and handed her the thermos. "Coffee with cinnamon." "You said it smells like childhood to you." She took it, sat down next to him. There. No one even shouted after me. No one said, "You're crazy." No threats. No curses. Just silence. As if they had exhaled. Finally. "Maybe it's for the best," he replied quietly. "You know, when someone who's been oppressed leaves, it's easier for the rest of us to breathe. Because the mirror is gone." Sophia was silent. Something broke inside her, but it didn't hurt anymore. It just let go. He put his hand on hers. "You don't have to be strong all the time. If you want, you can fall. I'll catch you." She looked at him, deeply, without defense. "Do you know how scary it is when someone suddenly sees you?" "Yes," he said. "But it's even scarier when no one sees you your whole life." He gently took her chin in his hands. He brought his lips to her cheek and kissed the scar. Not as a victim, not as a wound, but as part of a whole. "I see you. All of you," he said. Sophia closed her eyes and suddenly laughed. not loudly, just a whisper, as if an old, rotten spring had burst inside her, and in its place, lightness appeared. "I see myself too," she replied. Finally. They got up. They picked up their bags. They walked to the station. The road was dusty. Pebbles crunched under their feet. Birds chirped somewhere in the bushes. Nothing special, except that every step was a beginning. The morning was cool. The kitchen smelled of toasted bread and cinnamon. Light streamed through the curtain she had hung herself. All around were unfamiliar walls, an unfamiliar table, simple dishes. But every item had now been chosen by her. Not taken, not endured, but chosen. Sophia stood at the stove. She poured coffee into a mug. She took a sip. Hot. Bitter. Just the way she liked it. The window was open. The wind ruffled her hair. Children were laughing somewhere on the street. Not a single glance. Not a single scarf. Only her, in a shirt, her hair loose, her face no longer hidden. On the wall was a shelf. On it was a photograph. Not an old one, not with strangers. A new one. It was her and Daniel, in the garden. He was holding her hand. She was looking at the camera, at her forehead, at her face. Without fear. The book was lying on the windowsill. A bookmark was on the last page, the last sentence. And when she looked in the mirror, she wasn't afraid for the first time. Sophia walked over to the mirror, an ordinary mirror in a wooden frame. She stood it upright. She looked at it. The scar was still there. The same. But her face was different. Not a stranger's. Her own. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just looked into her eyes and stayed there. If you've ever felt ashamed of who you are, write the word "I see" in the comments. Let the whole world see how many of us there are. Those who can no longer be ignored.